And the next part is creating the smoke trails. We will use a fire also, I guess, but I call this smoke trails because mainly we create a smoke with this thing. Before we go inside of Pyro, we need to create a source, and we again go to our source from frags. So let me move it here, and this will be source for the debris, and actually it's debris simulation over here. We can definitely, put the simulation in a different geometry, but it's such, small. If we understand that all the thing is just a source, and all thing which basically we do with debris is take our geometry and replace with copy to point. So it's up to you. You can use a different, node if you want to. But with the smoke trails is a little bit different situation. So what is the difference? If you look at our source here, go to somewhere frame 26 or some like here. Here we go. So the main difference between source for debris and source for the smoke trails is that our sources, our fragments, will exist the whole simulation frame, well, or not. We can choose our fragments will create the smoke and fire in all the paths till they fall down on the water, or just the part of this path. Sometimes we can create a simulation when the fire and smoke comes just in the first few seconds. Then our fragments just fall down somewhere in the water. We won't see this in our 100 frames, but we can choose. And this option create a few difficulties for us, because this method is pretty simple, and we definitely can use this method for creating a source for the fire if we remove explosion points, because we don't need to use just one frame, we need to use all frames. Okay, but what is the difference? Let's copy this attribute triangle. I think that till this time we can use the same setup. Okay, we remove elements which elements which are not moving anyway. So so I don't need to remove those guys. And if I use this geometry as a source for the smoke and for the fire, what I need to do is create the particles. So if I apply scatter sub, what is the main problem? Let me remove relaxed iterations. Let's increase the density like to 100, something like that. Oh yeah, I need to unpack those guys because they packed. We use the pack object here. So let's unpack and let's look at the points here. If you go frame from one frame to another, let's go to frame 27 just to compare our particle position. And here we go. So if we compare those two fragments, oh come on, it's always really calculated. So we can see at the moment this result, but our particles each time will have a new position when we create a scatter for the particles, and that's a problem. If we use all particles to producing the let's say we can look at this element. Well, it's hard to see, but if I add the attribute randomize, let's say, or maybe not the randomize attribute noise, I want to see it to look at the pattern. So enable that. By default, it's creating the noise in color. Let's make a remap to make it better visible. So let's compare and go to frame 27 and 26, and you will see that our fragments will have a different noise in all frames. I don't know why it doesn't want to cache all this thing, but if you look in the objects and if we try to compare results, the result will be different. And the thing is because we use position as a noise input. Okay, the local attribute is position, and our objects flying, they moving, and position for each point will be different. So the scatter node create points in different position, and the attribute noise will create a different noise in each frame. And that's not that what I want. If I want to apply some kind of noise to my particles, I want to keep this noise in the particle positions. I want to have the same pattern on each element, on each frame. I don't want to have a different noise in each frame. It will be very noisy, you know, it's like a flickering, and it won't be very good. So what we need to do in this case? In this case, somehow we need to link our particles to geometry. But there is two main problems. Well, somehow we need to connect particles to geometry surface. That's one thing. And another thing is in all our frames we have a different geometries. So in this frame we have less geometry, in the next frame we have more geometry. Somehow we need to have the same particles amount in each fragment, and that can be a problem. So what we can do in this situation? In this situation, the most simple way to make it work is create particles for all fragments for my ship. So not just for those fragments, for the whole ship we have here. Okay, and then connect those particles to fragments to make particles move, or points move with the fragments, and remove unused fragments. Remove fragments which we basically remove with the distance. So in this situation we need to change almost all in the beginning. So all this, and we can do the same till the attribute delete. So what I need to do now, after this attribute delete, I want to apply the scatter. Scatter sub. Let's connect it to attribute delete, and let's create, I guess, the same amount, 100. Let's say 150 to make more particles. The more particle is better, because we're going to use those particles for creating the fields for our and those fields will be the source for the smoke simulation, smoke and fire simulation. So now it's work. What do you want? Oh yeah, we have a limit. So let's increase the max points from 1 million to 10 millions, because it's great, or 7 million points. It definitely takes some time. Yeah, that's much better. So we can see that now we have a almost 8 million points. All right, what else I want to do? I want to set up my output attributes. So I want to enable prim_num attribute and prim_uw attribute. So those two attributes will allow me to position those points in the geometry using the attribute interpolate node. So what does it mean? It means that now I can create those points in some static frames. It can be a rest position. So again, using the time shift node, I will freeze frame on frame, I don't know, 23, let's say. It will be the rest position for my particles. Okay, so we need to store this position in each fragment here. Okay, come on. Let's do this. All right, and then using the attribute interpolate node, we can take our particles and interpolate to, so there is two inputs. There is attribute interpolate, so it's destination geometry, and source of attributes to interpolate. Okay, so we use the same source prim and source prim UVs. Okay, and in this case, what I want to do, I want to create the rest field. So for each frame, I will make a rest position for those points, and the first input is a deforming option we take from the interpolation, and another is rest position we take from the scatter option here. So now we store the rest position for each particle on the surface on our fragments. And that now should work. Oh, come on. It takes some time because there is a lot of particles. We will remove them, but for this moment we need to take all our geometries and make a scattering option. And I'm always turn off the relaxed iterations because sometimes it's way slow, but really we don't need to use this relaxation. So now what I want to do, now I need to copy the rest lengths, so we definitely need to do exactly the same as we did with our pocket object. So now we have not a pocket object, we have a scattered points. And we do all the same here. So now we can see that after attribute triangle we have just points which have some movement. And we also have points on different surfaces. So let me increase the distance for those points, maybe 0.4. And also to remove other points, we can also set another one threshold. Let's add the float speed variable, and it will be the length of the velocity. So we're going to use our rest vector and velocity. So we use both thresholds. So we're going to use the speed. If the speed will be smaller than, let's say 5, I don't know, then I will remove point. So if your speed will be smaller than 5, we'll remove. Okay, so we have just points. Also have points here. Or what? Yeah. I don't know, somewhere. What? Oh, this camera. I thought that it's point. No, that's my camera. All right. So anim cam. Here you go. So this object in frame 25, and if we go to frame 26, it definitely will have more and more objects. So I don't need to use unpack now anymore because we don't have the packet objects. I don't need to use a scatter option. And scatter note because I already have my points. So let's remove those guys and let's go to attribute noise. So now let's compare the noise. Let's just go up. In one frame, and let's see in this noise pattern for this fragment. Is it changed? Do we have any changes or not? So if you look at this violet noise here, the blue and violet noise, and green areas over here from the right side and from the left side, we should have the same pattern for this fragment in the previous frame 26. We will catch this thing, so I will look at this more closely. So I can use a flipbook while I'm doing this all the time. So let's make a flipbook. Let's go from frame 23, doesn't matter. So I just want to look at the noise. This noise should move with my fragments without any changing, and that's the main like an option for getting the proper result, because I want to apply the noise, I want to make this noise moving with fragments. So I make a power and I stop streaming because I forget to change something. In attribute noise, I still using the local attribute like a position, which I don't want to use. I want to use my rest field because, well, rest attribute. Because if you use a position, the noise will move, and if you use the rest attribute, which is static, okay, for our fragments, it should work. So let's back again to our preview, and let's look at our rest attribute. Now let's look at this. You definitely can see that. Let's look at this from any fragment we have here. You can see the red, the purple parts. You can see that those elements move with the fragments. So you can see on this black spot will move with fragment. So now our noise is linked or our rest position is linked to our particles, or our points in this case, because we're not using any dot networks, just the points created with scatter. So let's rename it and let's create let's create a burn noise. We're still gonna use the sparse system. So let's set the burn attribute. Again, with the attribute noise, even if you don't have such an attribute, we don't need to create it. So let's set a burn temperature. It should be 1D noise. Additive, let's make animation and let's decrease it to 0. So now I want to look at this manual updating. So let's go and update. I want to look at the noise scale. Why I'm using minimum as 0? Because I don't want to have values lower than 0. And in this case, well, yeah, I can clip in post-process minimum and cut all areas or all values below 0. But I don't want to have many dark spots. I want to create more fire for the objects. So let's leave it as 0. Come on. Yeah, here you go. All right. Maybe let's decrease the element size like 0.25. And I want to increase the pulse duration. So let's change the speed. Maybe increase the 0.6. Let's put 75. Too much. Increase the fractal noise settings. I want to increase the maximum octaves and roughness. It will make more detailed noise. Okay, so this is a noise for the burn attribute. Now let's create a density. So the separate field for the smoke. I want to create smoke from the fire, but also want to create the smoke from the object. So maybe let's reduce it to -1 as default, like we had. So more dark areas. In this stage, we definitely need to use the post-process minimum because I don't want to have a lower settings. So let's make it roughness to 5, element size maybe a little bit bigger, maybe like 0.4, and the duration, I guess I can leave it as a grade for the fire. So let's rename this guy. It's gonna be my let's create call it like a smoke noise, and for the burn, because I create in temperature and all the thing, go to fire noise. So the fire and smoke noise looking good. And also we have let's update. Do we have a velocity? Yeah, we have velocity. So I can, okay, let's randomize velocity a little bit, or let's add a noise for the loss of point velocity. Let's keep incoming and let's set some cool noise because, well, always good if you apply some noises. So 0.1, maybe like 3 to the spill size, like we did here. Yeah, 3.15 here, and here the same, right? Yeah. Okay. And let's randomize it. Attribute randomize. So we can copy basically the same stuff. In this situation, I want to randomize the speed a little bit. So set a velocity and multiply by some ramp, I guess. So the custom ramp, I guess I will make a fit because I don't want to have very low values. So I'm making the minimum 0.1, and let's increase the amount of higher values. All right, so there's gonna be velocity noise. That's gonna be a velocity random. Okay, so let's look at that and let's update. Okay, so that was, well, let's go to auto update. It was my velocity, and that's what we have as a result. A little bit of random, a little bit of noise, and it's looking pretty nice. So let's remove some unused attributes, which I don't need to have. Oh, there's a lot of adding the texture. I didn't need, and then normal is the color. Let's remove the color. The rest position, I don't need to have a rest. The rest vector, source prim UV, and let's keep the temperature. So nothing here, nothing here, nothing here. Okay, so now let's go and volume rasterize attribute. Now I want to create the fields based on those particles. So I need to add the burn field, the temperature, the density, and velocity. Okay, that's what I should have. I have a group here. Let's make voxel size 0.1 by default. Let's remove the density, and also I want to normalize but clumped coverage. And the coverage scale I will leave, but I reduce the particle scale maybe to 0.25, maybe to 0.2. Let's say 0.15. Yeah, something like this. We will reduce this voxel size a little bit, so make it 0.05. Have a bad result. Yeah, it's looking good. Yeah, at this moment it's a little bit heavy, so we not too much. We have just 600,000 voxels. It's not too much, and we're gonna use this volume for creating fire. So in this case, I'm gonna create the simple pyro solver. So with an explosion, we create a separate elements for each stage, like a sourcing, simulation, and working with cache. In this case, we can use just a simple pyro solver. Well, it's not simple. I mean that we can simply add this pyro solver, but it doesn't mean that it's very simple for using. But pyro solver is really helpful stuff. If you go dive inside, we can see that we have the same setup as we create for explosion. Well, almost the same. We have a collision, we have the DOP import fields, which can, create for us the density, velocity, temperature, and the flame field. You can see that it based on the flame field. It means that we use a sparse system. So in this side, we have a collision object. We have the pyro also. And also we have the collision source and the source burn, like we did for an explosion, and we have the forces. So the forces, like we use with the RBD simulation, it's an empty space when we can add some gas microsolvers to apply the forces to our pyro simulation. So that's almost all what we can add here in the simulation, and almost all settings we have over here. We have 6 tabs, and let's change the start frame to maybe 23 or even 24, because it's even 25, because in the beginning of simulation, let's say to 25. So the basic setup I want to make here before I want to test to launch my first simulation. What I want to do is I don't want to use collision for now. I think we can add this later a bit. With the solving, it's calculating something. Why the pyro solver is a very interesting tool and very useful tool, because if you create a simple simulation without too many stuff like working with some shapes, creating some custom fields, if you want to create a simple fire or some smoke trails, smoke simulation, maybe somewhere far away from cameras, you don't need to create some extra details. It's a very useful tool because we can simply just within a few minutes make some changes and we already have a result. All what we need to create is a source and then add in the pyro solver. So it's going to be trail solver, and let's say click into match current definition. So with the solving, I guess I'm going to leave this by default. Almost all settings I'm going to leave by default. What I want to change here is I want to go into advanced tab and change the substeps, because we have a flying object and we definitely need to use, for the test, I'm gonna change it to 2x2. For my file sim, I guess I will change it to maybe 4 or 5 maximum substeps. The padding I'm gonna leave as it is, and yeah. So I'm going to source it. Let me see what do we have here. So we have a density, which is proper settings. Maybe increase a little bit of density to make it more like more dense result, you know. Then burn going to flame, which is correct. We use the maximum. Then our temperature using the pull operation with 50 by default, and we have the velocity vector. Actually, that's what we have, and I don't want to change nothing here. With an export, like we did with an explosion, we have the ability to resample our volumes, and we convert it into the VTB, and we make a resampling for our velocity, which is very helpful. So the voxel size scale can be to, well, I don't know, do I want to use the velocity for rendering? I don't know, let me decrease the size scale to 4. This really can help us to create more efficient cache files, because I don't want to spend a lot of space to caching the velocity. And all this thing I'm gonna leave by default. So we have the density, velocity, temperature, and the flame. So let's look at the simulation. And what is the very interesting thing that we already have a look here. So we have a Pyro post-processor node built inside of the Pyro solver, and inside of this solver, and we can even create some custom shader here. So let's play simulation. Even with those settings, with very low res settings, but we should have some result. So I'll make a pause and we will back soon. And that's what I tried to calculate, Houdini crash. So I will load my project again from the temporary folder. But what I can see from this preview is I definitely want to keep my container not, don't move this container under the water, because we have some particles, you can see some particles going down. So the next thing is, I guess, you can see some sub-steps here. So I guess for better result, I definitely want to add some additional sub-steps here. And with the smoke, you can see there is a lot of fire, but from here you can see that there's not too many smoke, and the main reason for this is because we have a big dissipation by default. We need to decrease it, and to avoid such flat surfaces, we need to add a little bit of disturbance. Okay, or maybe turbulence. Maybe turbulence a little bit better. Okay, so let's stop it. I'm gonna save it as a new file. So I save it as version 3, and let me make more room here. So let's go to manual update. Yeah, and I increase the density scale to 3, intensity 10, and temperatures to 7, just to visualize my file a little bit better. So let's go to setup and treat by close and below, let's say -1, just to make sure that if my elements falling into the water, that will not, you know, disappear before they go here. We have the, yeah, our water is on the 0 position, but we have the waves. So in some cases, our water level can, you know, temporarily go down and rise up. So make it -1. And I really don't know, do I want to use any collision object or not, because it will increase calculation time, but I will make a few tests maybe, and we'll see what result is better, with collision or without. Let's reduce the voxel size a little bit. So let's make it 0.075, let's say. And with solving, let's make for 2x4. Flames, time scale, all this thing can be fine. Maybe decrease the buoyancy scale to 0.5. I don't want to rise the smoke very fast, so 0.5 should be fine. And maybe temperature diffusion, go to lower settings. With the cooling rate, find reference temperature also. Flame, yes. So can emit smoke from the flame. So with dissipation, yeah, I need to definitely change it to like 0.05 to make it much smaller. That's too much, I guess. Even, I don't know, maybe like 0.25 if you want to change it 25. Let's say, I don't know, 0.001. So I don't want to dissipate the smoke almost. So 0.01. And with the turbulence, make it, I don't know, 1. So with the dissipation, we have some, we can set some control field as a temperature. Maybe decrease it to 0.75. With the disturbance, sorry, with turbulence, let's make a swirl size a little bit bigger. Oh, sorry, a little bit bigger, like 0.5. And all other settings, maybe even 2. With the pulse length, we can leave it the grain. Let's increase a little bit of grain and also increase the levels to have more details. Have a density as a control field, which is fine. Okay, now let's see the result again. I will save it, and I guess that I stopped my recording because when I make a pause, sometimes it just Houdini crashes, and I don't want to see it anymore. So yes, all the thing works, and let's go and look at the result with those settings. Maybe increase the density a little bit, 0.75 should be good. With the temperature fine, velocity fine, maybe decrease the velocity to 0.9. To, you know, more leave like a trail. I don't want to push my fire. I want to create some kind of trail, so maybe even 0.8. Let's say 0.85. Could be good. All right, now I want to actually make a file cache. And let's store all those guys from frame 25. Maybe not till frame 100. Maybe till frame like 70. I will look at that. So $S$F, load from disk. And that's gonna be my smoke or fire trail. Let's call this fire trails, because there's more fire in the beginning. So we can call the fire trails a null object. That's gonna be my out fire trails. So in one node source from frags, we create additional elements. So maybe I will rename it because it's not source anymore. We have the full simulation here. So now again, let's save project once more and save disk and background. Now I want to wait a little bit to look at the simulation. And that's what we have. So it's not particularly what I want, but why I want to show you this scene, why I want to show you this setup. Because in the beginning, when I began to work with this scene, it was like a year ago, I want to create some kind of this explosion from the Midway movie. And you can see that this explosion is not like a mushroom just in the beginning, but then you can see that there's a lot of trails, the fire trails, and you know, just yeah, there's something weird with compositing, like here, I don't know. Anyway, it's looking like explosion with a lot of elements flying away, you know, and that's what I want to create in the beginning. But you know, I'm not really like this explosion too much. I like the dynamic, I like the water here, geometry and all this stuff, but you know, I don't like this big amount of smoke trails, you know, it's like a dirty explosion, I don't know. So I try to change something, and it's looking like here, you can see especially the next explosion. It's a preview, and it's a very low res preview, because there's a lot of elements and it's low res. But what we need to change here, the first thing we need to change is there is a lot of fuel. There's a lot of flame. I don't want to have like those mushroom. I want to have more like a fire trails after the after my fragments, and not explosion in each fragment. And the another thing, you can see that we have the ship silhouette here, and this is the tower, and we need to fix this. There is some problem with the source because with the second explosion we have a big amount of elements. So almost the whole ship, you can see the whole middle area will generate the fire. So in this situation we won't see the explosion. It look like this is explosion. All right, and yeah, in this case you can try to work and create, maybe use this simulation as the fire trail and explosion at once, or you can combine those. But what I really want to do is remove the fuel, or in our case the burn filter, a little bit, reduce it, because you can see it's creating fuel around this object, and I really don't want to do this. Okay, so less fuel, maybe need to create a little bit more noise on the surface, because for now it's very, we scatter the points with all surface, so maybe add more noise, not just with fields but with points also. And the main problem here again, because in the next explosion, in the second explosion frame 48, we can see that, or 49, right, we can see the silhouette, and I will show you the reason why it's happened. So I'm gonna save this preview, and let's back to our sim. So it's take a little bit of time, and let's open it again. And the main problem is, if you look at our blast, when we, well, it's not a blast attribute wrangle. I need to rename it again, I guess, for better understanding what is going on inside of this attribute wrangle. Come on, it's scatter, and yeah, maybe I will add a noise and maybe more scatter points. All right, so let's go to properties. So remove by distance. So what I want to do, I want to remove the speed, I guess. Or I can keep it, but not too much speed in this case. So so what is the problem? Why it works in the first case but doesn't work in another one? So let's remove the speed. And the main problem here, that we calculate the distance between the static ship, all right, and explosion, between the RBD simulation. But as you remember, there is no this simulation anymore because I removed. But as you remember, in our dynamic, again it's just a VDB, anyway, in our dynamic we apply the ship animation, we take our transformed pieces. And the reason why we saw our fragments, let's get back here to my source from frag, and let's enable this somewhere in frame 52. Let's just, for example, let's look at that. Because our ship is moving, we move our middle part of the ship. As you remember, we create the animation. That's why our fragments, all fragments in the middle area, will rise up. Some fragments in the nose and in the back side of the ship will move down. So we, particularly even without explosion, we move our fragment with the ship animation we create. That's why you can see that there is a lot of elements here in this part, also there we have a moving, and I didn't want to do this. Somehow we need to separate which fragments will move because of the ship animation and which fragments will move because of the explosion. We need to separate them. So in this case, I want to repeat the same point deform here like we did in our RBD simulation. So what we need to do is take our ship animation, take our out deformation node. Let's go to manual update because I don't want to wait a lot of time. Let's copy this out deformation and let's back, I guess I'm right, yeah, animation. Let's back here to our source from frags. I guess I need to rename it. Anyway, let's go to object merge. We already did this. So this is our deform ship. And as you remember, we use the time shift for freezing our animation frame, let's say 27, like we did. It doesn't matter till the frame 45, I guess, or something like that, when I'm beginning the manual animation of the ship. Hey. All right, and let's use the point deform. So the second is the rest. Now deformation, and which object I want to deform. I want to deform my scatter points. So in this case, when I enable that, and let's update it, we're gonna have the static points, the static on frame. I don't remember what is the time shift here. I guess it's something like 23. And we have a static scatter points, and we deform those points with an animation. So in this case, this point deform will be like a rest position for our points. All right. So we need to make a little trick. In this situation, I can't combine using the one attribute interpolate node, because with this attribute interpolation, we take our static points and apply interpolate attributes to our animated points. So in this situation, this is our static points. So what we can do, we can add another attribute interpolate to take this deformation and apply it to this static points, and then use this attribute interpolate as the, let's move it up, let's move those guys, use as the destination geometry. So in this case, it should work. So now our deformation, our animation we create manually with the ship animation will be like a rest position. So in this case, I also need to reconnect my rest to this attribute interpolate. So this is the rest position, and this is our interpolation with the animation. So that should work. And now if I go to remove by distance on the frame 52, let's enable that and update. And I hope it should work. So again, you need to keep in mind what we did. Just we take our ship animation and apply for our scatter points, and now the moving of our manual animation we did will be as a rest position for point, and all other fragments which will fly away from the explosion, they should be here. So we remove all other elements. We can see that there is some small elements over here, but mainly now we don't have elements over there. So basically, yeah, we can add here a bit, I don't know, add a little bit more speed here. But what else I can do? I want to control the amount of burn field or burn attribute and the temperature depending of the time. So there is a few ways we can work with this. So in this situation, when we use our fragment as a source, they will generate the source in each frame, while those fragments will be away from the rest position. It means that they will produce the fire and the smoke in any frame. It it doesn't change this. It will not, there's no end of simulation for the fire. Okay, so there's a few ways we can work with some kind of animation. So let's say the more this fragment moves from the center, it loses some amount of fuel, because the main thing is its trail. So those fragments which fly away from the explosion, they have a little bit of fuel on the surface, and while it's flying through the air, this fuel will burn out, and the part of those fragments will lose the fire. So we need to imitate this. We need to make the situation where the more fragments in the air, the less burn field they should have, or the less density, or the less temperature. It should lose this fire. So there is a few ways. The first way, we can create some kind of the age attribute for our fragments. We can use this by the solver. We can take the frame where our fragment will appear for the first time, where the rest distance became 0.4, and then in each frame add the time increment. So it will look like the age attribute in particles, but just for geometry. And say that, okay, if we spend like 1 second, let's reduce the amount of fuel in this fragment. And this should work. Well, we can use a distance also. So the bigger distance from the rest position, the less fuel it can create. But in this situation, if you have a fragment which fly away, let's say in this area, and then fall down, when they begin to fall down, the distance will be again smaller and smaller. So we will add some fuel again. So in this situation, maybe the age will be the better way. But with the age simulation can be a problem, because with the age simulation we need to take care about the point number. If point number will change, then we can't link the age attribute to each point. In our situation, we can remove some points, and it will cause a problem. So the more simple way should be the velocity. So the bigger velocity, the more fire you should have, and you need to understand that the biggest velocity will be just in explosion frame. And then while it's moving through the air, we have the air resistance, we have their velocity will be smaller and smaller, and that will produce less less fuel for us. So let's do this. Let's try to find the settings for the velocity. To do this, let's go and let's move it about. We'll go to remove by distance, and we have the speed attribute, and it's not an attribute, it's a variable. So what I really want to do, I want to keep this as the attribute, as a float attribute. So I'm not using speed anymore here, but I want to use it later. So I store this speed attribute for all my points here. So let's look at this. Let's go to frame somewhere 27. I want to look just in the beginning of explosion, and I want to look the maximum of the speed in this frame, because I want to have a range for the speed to control the amount of fuel or create some kind of multiplicator to our fields we create over here. So I forget to update it because it's still in manual mode. And I want to see it at the speed in geometry spreadsheet. What settings do we have? So that the first thing I want to change here. Well, we already have some changes over there, but what really can help us to fix the big amount of fuel is reducing this fuel. So I got the geometry spreadsheet, and let's go and look at the high attributes, speed. So the maximum is over like 60, so 58, so give it 60. So what we can do, let's set the color, and let's go to ramp from attribute. Let's choose the speed. Let's go to range like 60. So what I want to do, I want to the lowest speed closer to 0 should be red color, the higher speed should be like blue color, and somewhere in the middle Oh, that's 0.5. Let's make it green so I can control, actually I can't control, but I can see how many the lower or bigger speeds do I have in my simulation. So now what to do is create a flipbook. So from frame 25 to frame, I don't know, maybe like 60, because it's take a lot of time to do this, I guess, because we need to calculate it each time, a lot of points and all the thing. So let's start it, and I'm gonna see the result. So I want to see how many particles gonna have a speed with bluish tint, how many particles will have a green speed or the red one. So that's how I can control. If there is not too many blue, I can reduce the range, because not too many points flying with such big speed, and that will create that won't create too much fuel, but sometimes it create less fuel than I expected. With this situation, we also can cut those points around the ship or on the ship surface which have a very low velocity. So as you remember, here on our remove by distance, we also have a velocity threshold. So we cut all those points which will have a velocity, a small velocity. In this area, we'll do the same. You can see that all those small groups on the ship, they have the red color, and that means that we multiply this by 0, and that we basically remove any burn or density field from those points, so they will not go into the simulation. But the thing is, they can have like a small speed, like 0.0001, something like that. So we need to cut elements from our simulation with a small speed. So let's say if you have a speed lower than 0.1, so let's do not create attributes here, and in this situation we won't create any field around this area. So I'm gonna see what speed have those elements, and I'm gonna cut those small pieces from simulation, because we use a sparse simulation. And let's say if we create something over here, I don't want to do this. I don't want to create the container around this element, because there is very, very low amount of fuel, a low amount of burn and density on that stuff. I want to concentrate in this simulation. So now you can see that in the beginning, frame 27, we have mostly like green color, just a few fragments have something closer to blue color. So I definitely need to reduce this range a little bit, but I'm more interested even in my second explosion, because there is 3 or 2 explosions, and then they can create a big velocities. So I want to wait until frame like 50 to look at the color velocity there, or color speed there. So we make a pause, and we're gonna back soon. And we back. So now you can see that it's nice. That's what I'm talking about. This situation, in the next explosion we have more blue color, because we have a bigger velocities. So I guess I can keep 60 as an upper limit for and use this as a multiplicator. So let's imagine that this is 0 and this is 1. So if you multiply our burn attribute and the temperature attribute, and we can play with the density a little bit, we will have more fuel in the beginning, and we're gonna have less fuel when those elements begin to slow down. Now we can see that in this area they will go into the orange color. That mean that the amount of speed is like here in this area. If we represent it like from 0 to 1, it's mean like 0.25, 0.2, so 5 times smaller than in beginning. Then it looks fine. All right, so now we can use this. So this just was for visualization, and we can call it speed width, color speed width. All right, so I can use now this as a multiplicator. How I can do this? In fact, after all my calculation, after all my fields, I generate here the fire, smoke, velocity, and velocity random. Well, I don't need the velocity anyway. I want to multiply it just for my float fields, which is burn and temperature. Well, they attributes now, but we will convert them into the fields later. So I'm gonna use the attribute wrangle, call the speed multiplier, something like that. I remember multiplier. Okay, speed mulch. And what I want to do here is take my, well, in fact, I want to normalize my speed. So the new speed will be the fit from the speed attribute. So the minimum will be 0, the maximum, as we will say 60. And we create a range from 0 to 1. So now all more elements, we have value closer to 0, speed closer to 0 will be multiplied by 0 and will almost replace the whole fuel which I have. So the next thing is our burn field. We multiply by this speed. All right, so let's copy this and do the same with the temperature. So let's look at the result. Let's be somewhere in frame 27, I guess, I don't know. Let's go somewhere at frame 36 because there is more elements that we can look at the range. Oh, sorry, I forget to make a mistake, sorry. Let's press escape. I need to apply the temperature here. Okay. And the speed here. That's how it should work. Let's update. I want to see a difference between the burn temperature here attribute we had and how big influence of my speed we're gonna have here. Come on. There's a lot of points, so we need to wait a little bit. Now let's go to jump to spreadsheet and let's look at the oh, come on, let's back to auto update, I guess, because I need to update it more faster. So we have the maximum is over like 1 almost, and almost 0 here. So within attribute wrangle, we now have the maximum is, oh, come on, 0.7 for the burn field. The same stuff for the temperature. We have the same settings here. So, because we create the same noise. Sorry. So what else I want to do here? Again, if you look at the burn, we have a values, very, very slow values here. So maybe say if our burn field will be less than 0.1, or let's say 0.01, let's remove point. I don't need this point because, you know, it's very, very low range. By ptnum, or Well, I guess because we have the same settings for the burn and for the temperature, I can, use or burn or temperature attribute. It doesn't matter. So let's Control Enter. Now you can see that we have something there. So let's look at the difference. And you can see I'm talking about those small areas around the ship. So here, here, here. Definitely I want to have them because when I use the sparse simulation, container will be created over here. But with those guys, it will be like 3, 4, 5 times bigger. I don't want to do this. So I will remove those elements, and now you can see that we have points. Let's make sure that, yes, I have points just in this area. This is my camera. Always try to see, come on. And this is my cam. All right, so I need to remove the speed from there. I don't want to have it, but before I go inside my simulation again, what I want to change, if we back here to our points, what I said about this, that we scatter our points around the whole surface, almost filling this surface with points, so it's create like a flat fill around. What I want to do, I want to add a little bit of noise here. Okay, so I want to take my points and apply some kind of noise. Let's say attribute noise. I want to apply the simple color noise because it's visually always better to look at the color. So it should be 1D, simple 1D noise. And also I need to use the rest position as we did, the rest attribute, because I want to make this noise move with the elements. So it can be animated, right? Is go to sparse convolution because I want to have a more contrast elements here from noise. Maybe less element size. Yeah, something like this, more random, maybe 35. All right, and I don't care about minimum really, because I'm gonna use this CD channel just for the blast node. So now we can say that, okay, if our point will have the value CDX, let's say, because we have 1D, it doesn't matter what channel I use, the red, green, or blue. If you less than, let's say 0.3, let's remove this point. It shouldn't be a point. Let's remove it. Maybe even 0.5. Yeah, that's much better. So now I create noise not just inside of the fields. I create a noise for my points and remove some of them to create simulation just in some areas on the fragments. And another thing I want to add here is, so that's not it. Another thing I want to add here is make a little bit of interpolation. So the thing is, as you said with our simulation, even if I use like 2-4 substeps, our elements flying with the big speed. And let's say in such areas, we can have a very incorrect result. They will create like a plumes of fire. So we need to make, we need to stretch those elements in the way they move. Something we can create with velocity blur over here to stretch it. So we can use it. I disabled that. So what I want to do, I want to shift my points in the direction they move. I already did this in my destruction building scene, so let's repeat this over here. How we can do this? We can simply create the attribute warp. Let's say it position interpolated by velocity. Pause int by val, but just one word I can type full, because it's, if I type all letters in, it's gonna be very long. So what I need to do this. So the main principle, the main idea of this interpolation, let me draw a little bit. The main idea is, let's say if we have one point in frame, I don't know, 1 here. The same point will be on frame 2 in this position, all right? So if we apply the simulation in this situation, okay, so the plume of the smoke we will create here and here. Okay, let's imagine that we have a lot of points in this area. So let's imagine this is like a small fragment, okay? And all those points using the rest attribute will move in exactly the same distance in another frame, all right? So what if we take our velocity vector? All our points have the velocity. What if we have this, we take our velocity vector, and as you know, the velocity vector shows us like a distance from one to another one. And I take the part of this vector and say, let's randomly shift this point position for all those points randomly along this velocity. All right. So I'll create a trail. We can move in this direction, in this direction. So we create some kind of particle trail. We shift our particles, or in this case points, along the velocity direction. So it won't be like this. It will look like, you know, stretched areas, and it's gonna look like more interesting, because if we divide this into a few sub-steps, it will be will create a much better result than just, you know, spheres. So let's do this. So as I said, we need to take a velocity and take just a part of the velocity vector. I don't want to stretch my particles along all velocity vector, just see in some areas. We can control it. So we take our velocity and let's divide our velocity at some value. Let's say parameter. Let's call velocity part, and let's make it 1 by default. Okay, and let's, like, I know, 100 float range. Okay, now what I need to do, I need to take my position for all points and subtract this position and subtract for the our vector. So let's see, what do we have? Well, that's too much. Let me just make a velocity part like 10, so it's much smaller. You can see that we shift our points. If we enable velocity, now we can see that our points move back by a velocity vector. Well, in this case, move forward. We can choose in which direction we move. So basically, we move our points in velocity direction. Each point has a velocity, and we move this using this velocity. I do this before I add velocity noise, because I don't want to, you know, move them with velocity noise, just in direction. But I move all points at the same direction. But if I want to make it randomly, some points move just in a little distance, some points in a bigger, I definitely should add what I should add. Right, I need to add the random. So let's take the random point number and let's multiply. Let me shrink it. Let's move it about here, the random. So I take my direction, okay, and multiply into the random value, and now I will connect this to our subtraction. Cool. Let's disable that. We already understand that it works. So now you can see that we shift our particles back we create some kind of trails, but we're not producing the new points, which is important. We can use the trail sub to create a trail from the points, but in this case they will produce a new points. I don't want to do this. I already have points I just want to move them along the velocity. So with the velocity part, I can control the length of this movement. Okay, so what a big distance I need to use in this case. So independent of velocity, in fact, because if we really have a huge velocity, so we can apply like 20, maybe like 25, you should be fine in this case. So how many points do I have? 45,000. I guess it's more than enough in this case to fill all those gaps. Let's look at the skater. 150. Yeah, I will produce a little bit more points, I guess, because I remove some of them. Here with the blast node, because before the blast node, before the blast node, I had 180,000 points, and after the blast, I have 45,000. So I remove many points. So let's redo. Let's make more points again, and I guess it can again fill the limit, because we have 10 million particles, 10 million points maximum. And then we have a warning here. It will mean that it fills the limit. Yeah. How many points you want? You want 13 millions. Okay. Instead of that, it generate like 10 millions. Let's increase the maximum point. I guess that our computer will make our simulation for us. It's just a point. It's not a dynamic even. We just scatter those points on a surface. Yeah, we create the interpolation and all this thing, which, as you can see, takes some time for calculating, but I guess that we can spend like 15 minutes for all frames, and that will be suitable. Alright, so let's back to attribute delete, and let me check, do I create all what I want? Velocity random, speed multiplier, attribute delete. Yeah, it's looking good. It's looking nice. So let's back to volume rasterize attribute. Let me save it. And let's go to volume rasterize attribute. I want to look at this thing. Do we have any, gaps between particles? And I guess it should be fine. Should be fine here. Okay. Yes, looks fine. Yes, looks fine. Alright, so let's just look at this again, just before the final simulation. I want to, another thing I want to do here in the Pyro solver. In a sourcing, I will reduce the density because there's too much density. With the flames, I remove the smoke because there's a lot of smoke. I don't need to generate smoke more than I have in the source. With velocity 0.75, let's velocity a little bit. All the thing, I guess, I'm gonna keep as we have here. So as you remember, I know why my settings is bad here. Okay, buoyancy 0.75. Oh, in my shape, I had a turbulence. I guess that I'm loading. Oh yeah, the last time my project just crashed and without saving in the temporary folders. That's why I don't have a correct setup. So let me quickly do the same what I did last time. So the voxel size is 0.1, should be fine for my test, because you can see that area will be very big of flying fragments flying away in a big distance. So maybe we need also cut this area. Okay, let's let it be here. Go to solving, and I want to enable turbulence, and as you remember, I add the turbulence of 1, and my dissipation will be 0.01. With dissipation, I use the temperature of the control field, and as I remember, I set 0.75. 75. Okay, with the turbulence, the swirl size is bigger, the grain is bigger, the levels is bigger. All of this stuff, I guess I leave as it is. So 2 and 4. And that's it, I guess. Then stimulus temperature flame. We can make it 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 because I'm gonna apply the visualization after I create this stuff, so after my simulation. So before I do this, as you can see, I spend a lot of time for creating the source. So I want to pre-cache my source points, my source particles. Let's call this the trail particle source. Come on. And yeah, that's it. So we sorry, we begin our frame somewhere 25. Come on, let's update this thing to 100. So I'm gonna recache this thing, and I'm gonna cache my trail solver. So how I call this? Out fire trails. Okay, and go to the file cache. I don't know why my file cache removed from here. Again, maybe I incidentally removed something, I don't know. Because I had it, so let's call fire trails. I already have my fire trails, so let's call it fire trails version 2, just to make a different simulation, and we can compare the result of those two simulations. What is the difference between the last one and this one? Because this one should be a way different, as you can understand, because we change a lot of stuff here, so it should be a way different. Okay, so now we're gonna spend like I don't know, a few hours as a minimum, and maybe half of the day, because again we will create a huge container around this sim, and we will see the result in our visualization state when we will render out our explosion and fire. So we move ahead and create another one additional elements.